Good morning, everybody. Again, so glad you're with us today. My name is Joel. I have the honor of being the lead pastor. And did you know that it takes around 60 people every week to do what we call a weekend service? Between worship team, the great folks in the back, the production area that bring the service to you online, children's people in two buildings over there, then the nursery over here, first impression, safety team, the deacons back in the back. It just takes a lot of people. We're so grateful for all those wonderful hands that serve us. And we're just so thankful that you serve. Your teamwork makes the dream work. If you're joining us online, I want to give a special welcome to you. Again, there's a great group of people that believe in this ministry of bringing what we do to you. And we know there's a lot of different reasons why people join us. For some of you, you're joining us there because you're sick and you can't be here today, and we're so glad that we can bring that to you. We know there's a certain percentage of you, too. You're checking us out. You're doing your homework. You're going to figure out what we're really about over a few weeks, and that is incredible. That's the story of several here today in-house. So while we're so glad that you're there, you're going to love it when you're here, and we can't wait to meet you. Guest in-house, thanks so much. Like we said in the video, we hope you stop by the guest center when we're done today. Just a gift, no high-pressure sales pitch. Just want to meet you and say hi. Take less than 5 minutes of your time, and we'll get you in, we'll get you out. But just want to meet you and just say hi. Thanks for being with us. I want to talk today in the message about relationships. Now, I'm telling you right out of the gate what I'm saying. Relationships. And we all have them, and they can all get complicated. Right? Can we just admit that sometimes relationships can get complex? I have a simple illustration here to show you how complicated they can get and maybe why they get so complicated. I have creatively called this person A, person B, person C. You can be whomever you want to be. Now, person A has a line of communication with person B. Person A has a line of communication with person C. Easy enough. Wait for it. Person B has a line of communication back to person A. Person B also has a line of communication to person C, lest we forget person C. They have a line of communication back to person A, and they have a line of communication back to person B, which means if you just take three people in a vacuum, no previous experience, no previous life, they're just like sterile human beings, and you dropped them on the earth, they would have at least 6 different lines of communication. Imagine what that number becomes at 5 people. 10 people, or maybe the largest small group we have on campus, or that meets during the week, 12 people. The numbers are exponential. Take that into your family, your extended family, your work relationships, your marriage, your assumptions, how you were raised, and suddenly we have easily hundreds of lines of communication back and forth every single day, verbal and nonverbal. And that's why relationships can be so complicated. What we really wish is that we could have a friend that just sticks with us through thick and thin, and just that they're just no matter what happens, that person's always there. We want them to sing that song from the Toy Story movie, "You Got a Friend in Me." Don't we all want that? Just that friend that's going to be there no matter what through all the adventures of life. And it's hard to find that in real life, but we actually can see one example from a very unlikely place. Hollywood is not known for its deep, meaningful relationships. But there was this one that stands out. Now, people of my generation and older, you know these names. Christopher Reeve, that was our Superman. Like, literally, he did the Superman movies. We watched him fly across the screen in multiple movies. He was our Superman. And then Robin Williams was our comedian. He was the funny guy. And these guys were the best of friends. They met when they were in college in Juilliard, and they remained friends throughout their lives. And when Christopher Reeve had an accident, in a horseback riding accident that left him paralyzed, he had to face multiple surgeries, and he wasn't even sure he was going to survive. And in Christopher Reeve's autobiography, he actually writes about his friendship with this comedian, Robin Williams. And he writes this in his book. He says, "As the day of the operation drew closer, it became more and more painful and frightening to contemplate. I only had a 50-50 chance of even surviving the surgery. And then, at an especially bleak moment, the door flew open, and in hurried a squat fellow with a blue scrub hat and a yellow surgical gown and glasses, and he began speaking in a Russian accent. He announced that he was my proctologist and that he had to examine me immediately. Now, my first reaction was that either I was on too many drugs or I was, in fact, brain damaged. But," writes Reeve, "it was Robin Williams. My old friend had helped me know that somehow I was going to be okay. He said he would do anything for me. And I thought, wow, not only do I have my wife Dana and my kids, but I have friends like Robin who truly care. Maybe it can be okay. I mean, life's going to be very different, and it's going to be an enormous challenge, but I can still laugh. And so there's still some joy. And in this one humorous act, Robin Williams proved what we all want in a friend. The person that's going to be there and make us laugh and we feel like crying. The person that's going to simply say, I'm going to do anything for you, and I'm just going to be here. There was nothing that Robin Williams could have done to change the outcome of Christopher Reeve's accident. He would be paralyzed the rest of his life. Nothing was going to change that, but his friend was there. Now, I don't know these men's relationship with Jesus. I don't know. Maybe they had one and you're more of an expert than I am, because that's where I kind of stop with the story, just their friendship. But our relationships need work. They take time. You don't get a friendship like that without investing something in the other person and without being invested in by the other person. That's a two-way street. Now, the challenge becomes is that we can often live, let's just say, unwise lives, and we don't cultivate those relationships like we should. And then when life falls apart, nobody's there. And we wonder where everybody's gone. But just maybe the Lord's got some wisdom for us on how to deal with that. I have a former senior pastor of mine who would often say there are two groups of people: those who are in a storm and those who are about to be in one. And he wasn't saying that to be pessimistic. He was saying that because that's life. Life sometimes can be measured by this challenge, and then you get past the challenge. But then we know how life works. The next challenge is coming. And the difference is not the challenge, the difference is our outlook. And very often that outlook is fueled by the relationships in our lives. So today, as we continue this series, The Ways of the Wise, it is in the book of Proverbs. I love the book of Proverbs. It's just such incredible wisdom there that God has put. And we're looking at some of the major themes from the book of Proverbs and just kind of grouping it together. And today, in part number 3, we actually get one whole chapter that deals with this subject. And it deals with so many different subjects that I kind of wish my watch broke and that my timer broke so that I could tell you all about it, but I can't. So I got to summarize some of this stuff, so bear with me. In your small groups this week, you're going to dive in more into some of these verses because there is so much going on. It's page 451 and 452 in the Pew Bible there in front of you, and if you don't own a print Bible of your own and you would like one, keep it. Okay, we have lots of these in our office, and we'll magically restock them before next week. Look it up in your phone, look it up in your print Bible. I don't care. I just want you to see it and get into the Bible so that it gets into you. Looking at the first 6 verses of Proverbs 27, we read this: "Do not boast about tomorrow. You don't know what a day will bring. Let someone else praise you, not your own mouth. An outsider, not your own lips. Stone is heavy and sand a burden, but a fool's provocation is heavier than both. Anger is cruel and fury overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy? Better an open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses." Now, these 6 verses are dealing with praise and correction in the context of relationships. Notice it's the word and not or. If you have a relationship with someone and all they ever do is praise you, you don't have a relationship, you have cotton candy. It's delicious, but it's not going to do you much good. There's got to be correction in that relationship too. Someone's got to be able to call you out on the carpet. Someone's got to be able to say, that's not really a good thing you're doing. I had a very good friend of mine who's with Jesus now, and he would often quote verse 6 a lot. Wounds from a friend can be trusted. The person that is honest with you and can tell you, hey, that's not good. That is someone you can trust. Whereas your enemy, they're just going to butter you up. Don't believe me? Look at politics. They're going to butter each other. An enemy's always going to do that. But in a relationship, there's got to be praise and correction. Now we press on, verse 7 through 12. One who is full loathes honey from the comb, but to the hungry, even what is bitter tastes sweet. Like a bird that flees its nest is anyone who flees from home. Perfume and incense bring joy to the heart, and the pleasantness of a friend springs from their heartfelt advice. Do not forsake your friend or a friend of your family. And do not go to your relative's house when disaster strikes you. Better a neighbor nearby than a relative far away. Be wise, my son, and bring joy to my heart. Then I can answer anyone who treats me with contempt. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Now, this is dealing with these family and friendly relationships. It's talking about cultivating those relationships in our lives, those people who are near to us. Now, family, we don't have much of a choice in. We're given family. But all the other relationships, we have a really high degree of control over those. And so we need to cultivate those. We need to develop those. Too many of us go through life living solitary lives like oysters, and then we complain when the proverbial poop hits the fan and nobody's there. And yet we do that to ourselves. I mean, among all the things the year 2020 taught us, it taught us we are not designed to be alone. And that's what he's talking about. Don't try to do it alone. We say that with our small groups all the time. Don't do life alone. We're not supposed to. If you feel lonely, the loneliness in and of itself isn't bad. But if you have no relationships in your life, you have nobody you can call on, if there's no one that comes to your head when you think of that, something's wrong. We need to cultivate those. We need to work at those relationships. Now, Solomon goes on in 13 through 16. Now, this one, I'm going to read it a little slowly because what he's talking about, it can be a little complicated to us. So I'll kind of explain as I go. Take the garment of one who puts up security for a stranger. Hold it in pledge if it's done for an outsider. He's talking essentially about letting people borrow stuff. Short version. Verse 14, if anyone loudly blesses their neighbor early in the morning, it will be taken as a curse. And all God's people said, amen. Do not be loud in the morning. That one's pretty easy. Verse 15, a quarrelsome wife is like a dripping of a leaking roof in a rainstorm. Restraining her is like restraining the wind or grasping oil with the hand. Why did you groan? Why'd you do that? You actually kind of stepped into that one. So verses 13 and 14 are a pair, 15 and 16 are a pair, but it's dealing with more counsel for relationships. Now, the verses preceding were pretty positive, pretty uplifting. These are stated as the other side of this. This is the flip side. Proverbs often do this. Many times in the Proverbs in the Bible, we find this pairing. This whole, here's the good side, here's the bad side. And then when you drill into that, you find these little couplings of sayings. You have an A and you have a B, then you have an A and a B, and all of that makes a big A contrasted with the big B. That's what this is doing. And it's drawing this comparison. 13 and 14 are talking about don't confuse a neighbor with a stranger and a stranger with a neighbor. Well, the way I like to say it is this: don't mix up an ally and a confidant. All right? And allies just go in the same direction you are. They'll bail the second you are going a different direction than they are. They're just an ally. Nothing wrong with them. They're allies. A confidant's different. That's somebody you can tell you stuff to. You can tell you secrets to. They're going to walk with you on that journey no matter where you go. They're with you, thick and thin. They're with you. That's the difference. And Solomon is saying, don't get those backwards. Now he goes on and he says, worse than that is an obnoxious neighbor or a quarrelsome wife. Now, no, you don't laugh at me. Those are women that are laughing. So the neighbor thing kind of makes sense. But what he's talking about, I'm making fun of it because it's the whole loud thing. But the idea is the insincerity. Okay? If you walk out in the morning, maybe you still get the print newspaper, or maybe you're going to go check your mail, and it's early in the morning before you go to work, and you see your neighbor and you go, hey, how are you doing today? That is obviously fake, right? But some of us do that. We just overdo it, with our neighbors. And he's saying, no, that's hypocritical, that's fake, and everybody knows it. Bring it down a notch, be normal. And then he says, but what's worse than that is a quarrelsome wife. Now, why does Solomon say that? First, he had a truckload of wives. That's a different story. But it's not for that reason, though. It wasn't just because he was overwhelmed. He was the king. He could just send them away. He was the king. The issue there is what's happening underlying that in Hebrew. That's the language he's writing this in. That's the language of the Old Testament. And in Hebrew, the word quarrelsome means filled with strife, filled with challenge, heated. More descriptions of it would be bitter. We might say henpecking. Back in January, we talked about this in our message series, Happily Ever After. And we said, ladies, you're never going to browbeat your husband into being the man you want him to be. You'll never pummel him into being a great husband. It doesn't work. Men shut down the more we do that. That's all he's saying. He's saying the exact same thing. We just said it from a different passage. This is just the Old Testament version of it. He's saying, don't beat your husband up and expect him to come out being a better person. He's going to come out of pulp, but he's not going to be a better person. Again, it's more counsel for relationships. Then he moves on, 17 through 20. Lest we think that there's no place for correction in a relationship. Lest we think there's no place for a wife to correct her husband. Oh no, au contraire. Verse 17, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. And yes, that means in marriage too. Verse 18, the one who guards a fig tree will eat its fruit, and whoever protects their master will be honored. As water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart. I like that one a lot. That's one of my favorites. Death and destruction are never satisfied, and neither are human eyes. The crucible for silver and the furnace for gold, but people are tested by their praise. Though you grind a fool in a mortar, grinding them with grain like a pestle or with a pestle, you will not remove their folly from them. We see why I like the Proverbs. It just hits everything. But listen, not all sparks are bad for relationships. We use a lot of ways to mean sparks. We might say, oh, there was such a spark between them. And we mean that romantically. Most of the time what we mean is, oh, your sparks were flying. And we mean them bad. We mean like, they start fighting and you're like, whip, I got to go home now. And you start moving away from them. But not all sparks are bad. And yet, if we're going to become the people that we need to be, we're going to have to take some sparks in our life. We're going to have to deal with some kind of conflict in our life. Go back to the beginning of the proverb. Okay? Praise and correction are needed in relationships. Now, I wanted to do an illustration right here. I'm a Christmas light junkie, and that partly means that I have to build props and stands, and I do that out of metal because, in California, Central Valley, in the winter, what we get is a ton of wind. So I can't build it out of plastic, it's got to be metal, which means I got to cut metal. And I was going to show you I was going to cut some metal up here. So some of you are laughing because you know what would happen. Not only would I have to cover the carpet so it didn't burn, which is part of it, it's terribly loud. And I wear ear protection when I do it. And then on top of that, it produces a ton of smoke, which might set off the smoke alarms, which might get sprinklers going. It would be bad. So imagine, if you will, if I have a piece of metal this big and I need it this big, I've got to get out the angle grinder and I got to cut that thing. And when I do, it's going to throw sparks everywhere. Even though there's a little bitty guard on the back side, it's going to spray sparks everywhere as I'm cutting through it. But yet, if I wasn't willing to tolerate the sparks, I would never get it to be the shape I wanted it to be. I'd be stuck with 10-foot long pipes that I get from Home Depot or Lowe's. And we're the same way. We're the pipe. If we're unwilling to deal with sparks and some pain in our lives, we're never going to become the people God has created us to be. Someone's got to come along and be able to shave that stuff off. Someone's got to come along and go, no, that's not what it needs to be. And throw some sparks. And what I've seen this so many times. It happens in marriage, happens in working relationships, it happens in friendships, where there's a bond on the other side of conflict that you never achieved before it. There's a bond. It's weird. It's just kind of the way God works in our hearts. That there's a unity we get on the other side of working through something challenging on the other side of sparks that will never happen if we never had the sparks. Sometimes churches can get into this too, and they're like, well, we just don't want to fight. We don't want to disagree. Well, but we're human, and we're going to disagree. The question is, are you disagreeing in a way that is godly? Are you disagreeing agreeably, as we might say? In other words, are you actually being kind about it and graceful about it? Or are you just being a jerk? But that has nothing to do with sparks. You're going to have sparks in every relationship. They're not always bad. As long as on the other side of it, it has a function. And again, praise and correction in friendships. We're not talking about just some random person digging on you. We're talking about a friendship, a relationship, a marriage, some very close bond you have. Now, Solomon finishes up this proverb with this in 23 through 27. And this metaphor is a little bit lost on us. If you're not a rancher or a farmer, this one's a little lost on us, okay? Because if you're a rancher or a farmer, you immediately get this. Because for a rancher or a farmer, the value of what they own and what they have is either in the ground or in the livestock. So when you think of this big metaphor from 23 through 27, You and I just need to imagine our financial household. That's what he's talking about. Because he says, be sure to know the condition of your flocks, the condition of your financial household, your source of income. That's what he's talking about. Give careful attention to your herds, for riches do not endure forever. And a crown is not secure for all generations. When the hay is removed and the new growth appears and the grass from the hills is gathered in, the lambs will provide you with clothing, and the goats with the price of a field. You will have plenty of goat's milk to feed your family and to nourish your female servants. The reason we say female servants is because the male servants would be the ones out in the field working, and the female servants worked in the house. That's why they draw a distinction. But this is dealing with how finances affect relationships. Finances affect relationships. And I'm not going to spend long here because we talked about this last Sunday. That whole wisdom for greed. It's all there. Go to the website. Go to our social media pages. It's all right there. But a little different angle on this is how Proverbs 27 takes this. Because it looks at it from the angle of how finances affect relationships. Now, in marriage, finances remains one of the top stressors in a couple's life. Usually a lack of finances. But sometimes too much can be an issue too, but that's beyond where we are. It deals with how finances affect relationships, but also in friendships this can happen. If you've ever had a friend that had more money than you do, maybe a couple or a single friend, and they have more money than you do, they may think nothing of jumping in the car, heading to the city, spending $100 on a meal, spending another $200 or $300 playing around the city, and you're going, well, do I want to go hang out with them in the city or do I want to eat? Because I got to buy groceries with the $300, they're just going to and spend because they have more than I do. It affects relationships. That now creates a tension and a stress in your relationship. But like last week, you have to know what's going on financially. You can't ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist. See no evil. You can't do that with your finances. Solomon is saying you got to know what's going on because it affects relationships. Now, we talked about this every week, and I'll say it for the rest of the series. Biblical wisdom is not just knowing stuff. Biblical wisdom is taking intelligence and applying it both morally and ethically. So there's always a spiritual component to this. And what Solomon is trying to get across to us is that our wisdom is an issue of spirituality. It is a function of how we relate to the Lord and then how we relate to other people. So what Proverbs 27 in its entirety is trying to tell us is this: our relationship with the Lord frames our relationships with others. Our relationship with the Lord frames our relationships with others. That how we deal with the Lord and how He deals with us is a model for how we can deal with others. That's what I mean by it frames our relationships, like framing a house. It is the structure, it's the foundation, it's the stud walls inside the house that everything is hanging on. That's what I mean. It frames our relationship with others. That relationship is so important. And it also means why we have to be careful who we put into our inner circle. Now, we all know there are layers of friendships, all the way out to somewhere where they're like acquaintances. And there's different, I don't know, we don't have good words for those people, but I'm talking about your best friends. Your best friends, they need to be people pulling the same way you are. They need to be pulling towards Jesus, because here's the thing the Apostle Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15:33. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Your closest friends will influence you. Your closest friends will shape you to be something. Are they shaping you to be like Jesus, or are they shaping you to be like the world? But our relationship with the Lord frames our relationships with others, so we know we're called to drive towards Jesus, that we're called to drive that direction. So what we have to do then is we have to consider our relationships. I know as I've gone through this, you've thought of people. You may have elbowed your people right next to you, all right? You got those people in your head. Consider those. Are you self-serving in those relationships, or are you loving in those relationships? Are you that person that every time that friend texts you, your phone is always broken, turned off, in silent, in your pocket, in the other room, anything but available? That's self-serving. Because probably what happens is you miraculously find this thing and it works perfectly when you need something. And buddy, it works every time. 5G. And then you're like, why are you ghosting me? Well, because you've been ghosting them for 6 months. That's self-serving. Loving says, you're my best friend. It's the Robin Williams. Of course I'll be there for you. Now, obviously, boundaries come into play here. That's a little beyond where we are. We've talked about boundaries a lot. That doesn't mean you destroy yourself helping somebody else. We're not saying that. But I'm being very broad brush here, very 38,000-foot view here, okay? Are you self-serving in those close relationships, or are you loving in those relationships? Are you just taking, or are you giving and receiving? That is part of it. Now, we can't leave this subject without hitting, just for a few minutes, what is kind of the elephant in the room on this issue, and that is repairing relationships. Full disclosure, this could be its own message series. And we've been toying with the idea of doing one, and I think I'm down to 12 weeks of repairing relationships. I mean, it's just like, this one's huge. I mean, this is everything we deal with as Christians. The Bible says we are called to the ministry of reconciliation. Why? Because we are messed up. All right, so I'm going to get, like right now, a 12-week message series in my head down to about 2 minutes. Listen fast. Because this is not meant to be every single thing. This is just an idea for you. First, make the first move. If you're going to repair a relationship, somebody's got to move. You do it. Make the first move. You know there's an issue. You feel there's something going on. You think there's a problem. You know there's a problem. Whatever that is, make the first move. Hey, can we talk? Hey, I know it's been a while. I don't like that. Can we chat? Hey, we used to be so close. Someone's got to move. Make the first move. And then be truthful. Don't be afraid to admit when you were hurt. Hey, that hurt me when that happened. When you said that, it hurt me. When this happened, it hurt me. Or I have realized that I hurt you. I realized that I pushed you away and I wasn't there for you. Whatever that, be truthful. And then follow through. And this is probably the biggest one of all, but not in the sense of you got to do it. Yes, you got to do it. But in the sense of it's got the most asterisk on it. Because just because you reconcile with someone doesn't mean you're going to be their best friend ever again. Sometimes that relationship is just a beautiful thing that happened in the past and you go forward your separate ways. But whatever that is, you follow through. Now, if you're supposed to go your separate ways, that simply means you release your right to get even with them. That's what forgiveness is. It's releasing your right to get even. You're saying, oh, I have no hard feelings. There are people in my life that's true for that I've parted ways with, and I just say, you know what? We've made our peace. It was a beautiful thing in the past, but I have no ill will towards them. But we're not best friends, and we're not going to hang out. But maybe you're going to hang out, okay? And you say, hey, that was just some big misunderstanding. Let's hang out sometime. Okay, now get the date right there. That's the moment. It's good dating advice, and it's good friendship advice, okay? You say, hey, let's get together. Get out your phone or your big old print calendar, unroll it, and go, okay, what you got 2 months from Tuesday? Get it right there on the spot. Follow through. Because look at how the Lord has treated us. Remember? I said that our relationship with the Lord frames our relationships with others. He made the first move. He came and died on the cross. He rose again. He stretched his arms out on the cross saying, I love you this much. I receive you as my own. Will you receive me? He made the first move. He was truthful. He said, apart from me, you can do nothing. Apart from me, you're going to hell. But I am the way to the Father, and I will take you to be with me. He was truthful, and he certainly will follow through as he has been doing many, 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 many times for a very long time. This is what Jesus did. And we're just mirroring what he did for us. Because our relationship with the Lord frames our relationships with others. How did he treat you? Treat others that way. I mean, it's simple to say, but I know it's hard to do. But our relationship with the Lord frames our relationships with others. Which means the Lord has not left us confused or wondering. He really has given us wisdom for relationships.